Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the AI in Total War Warhammer 3. One of the chief complaints aimed at Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires ever since it's come out is that the AI is too easy to deal with on every difficulty. Now, I think there's some truth to this, but I also disagree with the assessment that people have. I also want to say that I don't think that difficulty is the be-all and end-all. I think the purpose of difficulty settings is to give people a good, solid, enjoyable experience, not an insane level of frustration. There are people who complain about, oh, this game is too easy if it's not this level of difficulty. I personally don't care. I do want the challenge, but I want that challenge to be fun and engaging, not just for me to feel like I'm smashing my head against a brick wall. That's how I feel in a lot of games that are quote-unquote difficult a lot of the times. Very few games do handle difficulty very well. But let's look at the situation between Warhammer 3 and Warhammer 2. What are the key differences that make it easier, let's say, quote-unquote? Well, first off, if we look back at Warhammer 2, there were three big differences between Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3. One, the AI would confederate far more easily. Now, this wasn't necessarily as much of a benefit as people believed, because the AI is not necessarily great at handling a very large swath of territory. But it depends on who we're talking about. Certainly, if Malekith would unite all of Nagron against you, Hellebrand, all the minor Dark Elven factions, or Tyrion united all of Wolf-1 against you, that could be a genuine level of challenge, because you would defeat a couple of his armies and then they would show up with many more armies to deal with you. Furthermore, the AI had a bunch of melee benefits in Warhammer 2 that they just don't have in Warhammer 3. I mean, they still have benefits in battle, but they have certainly been reduced. And now we're in the situation where the melee meta for the player is far stronger, for the most part, than range meta. Depends on the faction, depends on the Legendary Lord, depends on the race, but for the most part, melee tends to do better than ranged right now, which sounds completely out there compared to Warhammer 3. And finally, the supply line situation. Right now, when it comes to recruiting armies in a campaign in Warhammer 3, the supply line situation has been significantly improved compared to Warhammer 2. We only get 4% supply lines, which is significantly lower than Warhammer 2. One of the big problems of Warhammer 2 was that you were severely limited as a player, regardless of the Legendary Lord or race you played, because of the supply line situation. That has gotten a lot better. So because the AI confederates less, because of the supply line situation, and because of the removal of many of the melee buffs, players have ended up with a lot more power than they did in Warhammer 2. And to be quite blunt about it, I hated Warhammer 2's campaign on Legendary, because I was fighting with limited armies against enemies that would just pull out doom stacks out of their ass. If that's fun for you, great. It wasn't really that fun of an experience. I much prefer the way Warhammer 3 did it. I do enjoy when the playing field, so to speak, is a lot more even. I don't care about difficulty for difficulty's sake. But okay, that's the situation between Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3. What about Realms of Chaos versus Immortal Empires? Was Realms of Chaos harder than Immortal Empires? Was the AI stronger in Realms of Chaos? Well, yes and no. I think yes, the AI could have more potential in Realms of Chaos, but I certainly don't believe that the AI was more capable. See, this was a big complaint that people made against Creative Assembly when Immortal Empires came out, and I think it's a load of bullshit. I say this as someone who has played Realms of Chaos campaigns since Immortal Empires came out. I played the Realms campaigns as Warriors of Chaos when they came out, when the Champions of Chaos came out. I steamrolled the entire map as Valkia in Realms of Chaos, like barely fought any real battles worth talking about, like maybe a couple against Kislev, but that was it. Just smashed my way through that campaign on Legendary with ease. Played the campaign as Yao Ming as well. Played the campaign as Kazdorfs, and I gotta tell you, Realms of Chaos is certainly not harder than Immortal Empires. Like, it is actually pretty pathetic in comparison. Realms of Chaos is like a complete steamroll. That said, it does seem more difficult for a couple of reasons. First off, you have the demonic evasions coming up here, and then you also have to waste 10 plus turns whenever the realms, like obviously when those demonic evasions are coming up, you have to send your best army into the Realms of Chaos on a merry-go-round trip, wasting time, wasting potential, as opposed to just having their army doing things on the campaign map. And speed is essential in every campaign. That's a crucial point to understand. You need to accomplish as many things as possible in a campaign to get ahead of the AI. Because if you let the AI build up, yeah, they're going to be more powerful. But if you strike hard and fast, they're not going to do so. And that's one of the things I've learned, certainly, playing Immortal Empire specifically. And at this point, if I were to pick up Realms of Chaos, I would easily conquer like half the map within like 60 turns. In fact, it would be so boring during a Realms of Chaos campaign to freeboard resources because I'd be sitting for like, you have to wait 120 turns to get him out as quickly as possible. That's how bad the situation is. But that's certainly one of the things that contributes to the perception of difficulty, not the actual difficulty. Secondly, the distances between Legendary Lords. So for instance, here I have Miao Ying. The closest Legendary Lords that are challenged to her are Azazel over here and Kairos Fateweaver over here in the Valerie. Those are the only two major challenges that Miao Ying has to face in her entire campaign. And if you're Azazel, the same thing applies to you as well. Every other faction, every other settlement that she's dealing with over here in Cafe is controlled by a minor faction. Yes, we have Snitch, sure, and he is a Legendary Lord, but his faction only controls one settlement, and he's going to be rolled over very, very quickly by Xiao Ming. So, well, he holds two settlements, I suppose. But the situation is that there's great distances between Legendary Lords, and we know for a fact that in both Realms of Chaos and Immortal Empires, the minor AI factions just get significantly less benefits to their economy, growth, casualty, replenishment than the major factions do. The playable ones. Basically, if a lord is playable, if a faction is playable by the player, when you are not playing it, in this case I'm not playing Azazel, then they get significant benefits, especially to their economy. And because of the distances, you don't have a situation where you can just easily wipe out Legendary Lords to eliminate them. But that doesn't mean they're stronger than in Immortal Empires. It just means they have more flexibility, they have more room for growth, but that doesn't mean the AI is somehow better in Realms of Chaos than Immortal Empires. It's just a question of safety for them. It's harder to traverse territory. Like for instance, here is Miao Ying. It would be a nightmare for me to have to deal with Kairos and Azazel just because of the long distances involved in the Chaos Wastes. So I probably wouldn't. I would fortify the Great Bastion against them to retake Snakegate. So distance does matter, like safety from distance. Beyond that situation, the map is just a lot smaller in Realms of Chaos. Smaller in the sense that, like provinces, settlements, regions themselves are smaller. What that means is there's less distance to cover between settlement to settlement. And the AI, like settlements, the settlement situation is of such a nature that you're always going to take, both you and the AI will always take more damage from attacking a settlement than they would from fighting a field battle. If they take damage, if they lose units, they're obviously going to be weaker for it. So the map being like, settlements being very close together in Immortal Empires obviously diminishes the AI because, well, out-resolve causes a lot of damage. That's simply how the situation is. And because Legendary Lords are far more closely together, they're quite likely to encounter each other very quickly in a campaign. And the potential of the AI of gaining a lot of territory before they have to deal with a major challenge is significantly reduced. That's why I feel Realms of Chaos feels like it's harder. But on top of that, the final point is that every faction, every baseline Legendary Lord and race of Warhammer 3 sucks one way or another. Like, their economic potential is far more limited than the Warhammer 2 factions. And this is a crucial element. Let's take Cafe, for instance, just as an example, right? As Miao Ying, I start to Gunpowder Road, I have Nangao, I don't have an economic building, all I have is the Nangao Forge. Okay, let's say I want to build an economic building. It costs 400 to get 150 income, buffing it to 187, okay, and 2% income from trade tariffs. So I'm paying 400 for almost 200 income over there. I'm getting almost 200 because I have perfect harmony at this particular stage. All right, that's one way of seeing it. If you're playing a demonic faction, you may spend a lot more for less income. Not thinking about Warriors of Chaos. If you're playing Nakari or Scarbrand or Kugaf or Kairos, doesn't matter, they all have crap economies. Kislev, again, has a crap economy. They just don't generate a lot of money as easily. And we can compare this situation to what the Greenskins can offer, the Dark Elves can offer, the Empire, even the Dwarves or Bretonnia can offer. They just generate a lot more money in their campaigns. Money is power. This is why the income disparity situation that I've talked about in a previous video on the biggest issues that I see with the game right now is so important, because it creates a severe imbalance in the game between factions. It just means that certain races, certain legendary lords are just better, flat out better than others, simply because they generate more money. And keep in mind, Cafe can generate up to 250 income from the remaining economic buildings. 250 income is pathetic compared to what other races can do that are coming from Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2 into Warhammer 3. And I think that what was realized when Immortal Empires came out, and this is my personal perspective on it, I think the Warhammer 3 races just end up being revealed for how dogshit they actually are. All of them, without exception. Because if you're looking at what Creative Assembly is doing, they're changing, buffing, reworking Kislev, Cafe, Nurgle, and Siege. Yes. Out of the legendary lords that came out, out of the races that came out, they're basically saying, we're going to rework all of them. They're not touching Nakari or Scarbrand yet, but I suspect that they will in the near future as well. And that should tell you something of how bad the situation is. I mean, there are certainly races from Warhammer 1 and 2 that do need improvements. Dwarves in particular, the Empire, Bretonnia could use some changes, just some adaptments to fit within Warhammer 3 better. Sure, that can happen, should happen. The Lizardmen as well do need some changes. But the fact that Creative Assembly is already looking to rework or buff or change the races that they add in Warhammer 3 should tell you all you need to know about how well they were designed. And the answer to that is they weren't very well designed at all. They are more limited, they're weaker overall, they have significant issues in their campaign. Cafe is the best of the bunch, and even Cafe has a lot of issues. The harmony meter is a nightmare to deal with in a campaign. It's always so annoying, it limits your campaign potential. Cafe at least can work, and crucially, Cafe has a very scalable economy from the very start. Kislev in the long term, sure, it does have a scalable economy, but Kislev also has a mountain of issues in their campaign. That's what I think on the subject. Questine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications. Let me know what you guys believe. Like, it really just comes down to, like, supply lines, bad race design, distance between legendary lords, that I feel makes all the difference. And AI factions confederating less, though I don't necessarily think that's as big of an issue as some people might think. I think like in Warhammer 2, it certainly made sense. It certainly made it difficult if an AI faction confederated quickly, but that's because you had limited armies. The AI is not great at managing or at handling a lot of armies that players can put together in Warhammer 3. Anyway, stay tuned for more.